You're standing in the cereal aisle and you can't breathe. It's such a small thing, such an ordinary moment. Dozens of boxes stare back at you, each one promising something different, and your hand hovers in the air, frozen. Your heart pounds like you're facing danger. Your throat tightens. Sweat pricks at the back of your neck. And all you're trying to do is choose breakfast. This is what it feels like when your emotions control everything. You don't always recognize it in the moment. Sometimes it looks like the flash of anger that erupts when your partner asks a simple question, the words leaving your mouth before you can catch them, sharp and cutting. You see the hurt bloom in their eyes. You watch them pull back, withdraw into themselves, and you want to take it back, but it's too late. The damage is done, and you're left wondering why you reacted that way, why something so small triggered something so big, why you can't seem to stop this pattern, no matter how many times you promise yourself you will. Sometimes it looks like the anxiety that wakes you at 3 in the morning, your mind already racing through every possible disaster the next day might bring. Your body feels wired, exhausted, and alert all at once. You replay conversations from weeks ago, searching for evidence that people are disappointed in you, that you've failed in ways you can't quite name. You rehearse confrontations that will never happen. You build catastrophes out of silence. Sometimes it looks like numbness. You sit across from someone you love, and they're telling you something important, something that should move you, and you feel nothing. Not boredom, not sadness, not anger. Just a vast, empty space where feeling should be. You perform the right expressions, make the appropriate sounds, but inside, you're hollow. And you wonder when you lost the ability to feel, when the world became so distant, when you became so disconnected from your own life. This is the invisible hand that shapes everything you do, every choice you make, every relationship you build or destroy, every opportunity you seize or let slip away, every version of yourself you become or bury. It all traces back to how you feel and what you do with those feelings. You think you're making rational decisions, that you're in control, that you're choosing your path through logic and intention. But underneath every choice, beneath every action, there's an emotional current pulling you in directions you don't fully understand. Fear tells you to play it safe, to stay small, to avoid the risk that could change your life. Shame whispers that you're not good enough, that you shouldn't speak up, that you should hide the parts of yourself that feel too much or too different. Anger convinces you that attack is the same as protection, that if you strike first, you won't get hurt. Anxiety promises that if you just worry hard enough, plan thoroughly enough, control tightly enough, you can prevent disaster. And so you build a life around these feelings without ever examining whether they're telling you the truth. You take the job that feels safe instead of the one that excites you. You stay in the relationship that's familiar instead of risking something unknown. You silence your voice in the meeting because fear tells you that speaking up will expose you as a fraud. You push away intimacy because vulnerability feels like weakness. You say yes when you mean no because you're terrified of disappointing people. You sabotage your own success because some part of you doesn't believe you deserve it. Years pass like this. You accumulate achievements that don't satisfy you. You maintain relationships that drain you. You perform a version of yourself that isn't quite real, waiting for the moment when you can finally relax, finally be yourself, finally feel at peace. But that moment never comes. Because the problem isn't out there. It's not your circumstances, or your luck, or the people around you. The The problem is that you've been living at the mercy of emotional patterns you never learned to understand or manage. And here's the truth that changes everything. Your emotions are not the enemy. They're not random storms that blow through your life without reason or purpose. They're not signs of weakness or proof that something is fundamentally broken inside you. They're not obstacles to overcome, or feelings to suppress, or experiences to survive until you can get back to normal. Your emotions are messengers. They're compass points, guiding you toward what matters and warning you away from what hurts. They're the engine of your existence, the force that moves you toward connection, meaning, and growth. They're ancient wisdom coded into your body, designed to keep you alive, help you bond, and show you what you value. The problem is not that you feel. The problem is that you were never taught how to listen, how to interpret, how to respond with wisdom instead of reactivity, how to work with your emotional nature instead of fighting against it. You were taught to be rational, to think your way through everything, to override what you feel with what you think you should feel. You were told that some emotions are acceptable and others are shameful, that anger makes you difficult, that sadness makes you weak, that fear makes you a coward, that too much joy makes you naive. So you learned to push your feelings down, to perform, to pretend, to build walls between who you are and who you show the world. And those walls didn't protect you. They imprisoned you. They cut you off from your own truth, from your intuition, from the guidance system that could have helped you to navigate life with clarity and confidence. They trapped energy inside you that needed to move, creating pressure that eventually explodes or implodes or numbs you from the inside out. But what if there was another way? What if you could feel everything without being controlled by anything? What if you could experience anger without destroying relationships? What if you could sit with fear without letting it make all your decisions? What if you could move through sadness without drowning in it? What if you could access joy without waiting for permission? What if you could become someone who understands emotions so deeply that you can work with them instead of against them? This is not fantasy. This is not wishful thinking. This is mastery, and it's available to you. By the end of this journey, you will not just understand your emotions. You will wield them with precision. You will transform from someone who is controlled by their feelings into someone who commands them with grace and intention. You will learn to pause in the space between feeling and action. You will discover the power of naming what moves through you. You will build the capacity to choose your response instead of defaulting to old patterns. You will understand the architecture of your emotional experience so thoroughly that you can predict, prepare for, and navigate whatever arises. You will stand in that grocery store aisle, feel the anxiety rising, and you will breathe. You will name what you're feeling. You will recognize the old pattern trying to take hold, and you will choose differently. Not because you've stopped feeling, but because you've learned that feeling and acting are two separate processes, and you get to decide what happens between them. You will sit across from your partner, feel the anger flash, and you will pause. You will understand what's really driving that anger, what fear or hurt or unmet need is underneath it. And you will speak from that deeper truth instead of lashing out from the surface reaction. You will build intimacy instead of distance, connection instead of conflict. You will wake at 3 a.m. with anxiety crawling through your chest, and you will not spiral. You will not rehearse disasters. You will recognize what's happening in your nervous system. You will know how to guide yourself back to calm. You will rest in the knowledge that you can handle whatever tomorrow brings, not because nothing bad will ever happen, but because you trust your ability to navigate it. You will feel the full range of human emotion without losing yourself in any of it. Calm in chaos, clear in confusion, connected to a power inside you that most people never learn to access. This is who you're becoming, not someone who has conquered their emotions or transcended their humanity or achieved some state of permanent peace, but someone who has learned to dance with what they feel, who can hold complexity without collapsing, who can be both vulnerable and strong, both feeling and wise, both fully human and remarkably free. The journey starts here, in this moment, with this choice, to stop fighting yourself, to start listening, to discover that the very thing you thought was your weakness is actually your greatest strength. Waiting to be understood and wielded with intention. Your emotions have been controlling everything. Your relationships, your choices, your sense of self, your entire life. But not anymore. Now you take back control, not through force or suppression, but through understanding, through practice, through the courage to feel deeply while living wisely. Now you begin the transformation from prisoner to master, from reactive to intentional, from controlled to commanding. Now you discover the hidden truth about your emotions and what they've been trying to tell you all along. The invisible hand that has shaped your life is about to become visible. And once you see it, once you understand it, once you learn to work with it, everything changes. Everything. You wake up, and the weight is already there. Before you open your eyes, before you remember what day it is or what you have to do, before conscious thought even forms, there's a heaviness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, a tension in your shoulders that tells you something is wrong, even though nothing has happened yet. This is how most of your days begin, not with hope or possibility or the gentle emergence into waking life, but with dread, with the immediate burden of having to be someone, to perform, to get through another day, of holding yourself together when you feel like you're falling apart inside. You lie there for a moment, trying to summon the energy to move, and already you're exhausted. Already you're planning the performance, the face you'll wear, the tone you'll use, the version of yourself you'll present to the world, so no one knows how much effort it takes just to exist. You shower, and the hot water can't wash away the anxiety clinging to your skin. You dress, choosing clothes that hide more than they reveal. You make coffee with hands that tremble slightly, and you tell yourself it's just caffeine, just nerves, just normal. You look in the mirror and practice the smile, the one that says everything is fine, the one that keeps people from asking questions you don't know how to answer. And then you step out into the world, carrying this war inside you that no one else can see. It shows up everywhere, in everything. You're sitting at dinner with your family, your partner is talking about their day, your child is asking for help with homework, and someone makes a small comment, a tiny thing, a joke you've heard 1,000 times. But tonight, it lands differently. Tonight, it hits something raw inside you, some wound you didn't know was open, and suddenly you're angry, not just annoyed. Angry, the kind of anger that rises fast and burns hot and spills out before you can stop it. Your voice gets sharp, your words cut. You watch yourself ruin the moment, see the confusion on their faces, the way they pull back from you, the way the warmth drains from the room. And even as it's happening, even as you're doing it, Some part of you is screaming to stop, to breathe, to choose differently, but you can't. The emotion has you. It's speaking through your mouth, moving your body, making decisions you'll regret in an hour, but can't prevent right now. Later, after the damage is done, you apologize. Again. You promise to do better. Again. And you mean it. You really do. But you also know, deep in your bones, that this will happen again. Because you don't know how to stop it. You don't understand why a small comment becomes a big reaction. You don't have the tools to interrupt the pattern between feeling and exploding. So the cycle continues. Reaction, regret, resolve, repeat, or maybe your war looks different. Maybe yours is quieter, more insidious. You're in a meeting at work and you have an idea. A good one. You've thought it through, refined it, rehearsed how you'd present it. The moment arrives when you could speak up, when the conversation opens just enough for your voice to fit in. But something stops you. Shame. That familiar companion. That voice that has lived in your head so long you sometimes mistake it for your own thoughts. It whispers that your idea isn't good enough. That someone smarter would have thought of it already. That if you speak, everyone will see how little you actually know, how much you've been pretending, how you don't really belong here. So you stay silent. You watch someone else voice a similar idea 10 minutes later. You watch them get credit, recognition, opportunity, and you tell yourself it's fine, that you didn't really want to speak anyway, that staying small is safer than risking exposure. But it's not fine, and you know it. Because this isn't the first time. This is the 100th time, the 1000th time, the pattern that has shaped your entire career, your entire life, the opportunities you didn't pursue because you felt unworthy, the promotions you didn't apply for because you convinced yourself you'd fail, the dreams you buried before they could disappoint you. Shame keeps you small, and small feels safer than seen. Until one day, you look around at the life you've built, and you realize it's not really yours. It's the life that fear and shame permitted. It's the version of yourself that never took up too much space, never asked for too much, never risked being too much. And the cost of that safety is your own vitality. Or maybe your struggle is the anxiety that never sleeps. You send a text message to a friend, a simple one, nothing important, just checking in, making plans, staying connected. You hit send, and immediately your mind begins its work. Did that sound weird? Was it too casual? Too formal? Did you say something wrong? Why haven't they responded yet? It's been 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 20. They're probably angry, or they hate you, or they're talking to someone else about how awkward you are, or something terrible has happened to them and it's somehow connected to you, your text, your existence. A simple message becomes a catastrophe in your mind. Your nervous system treats their silence like a threat. Your body floods with stress hormones. Your thoughts spiral into worst-case scenarios that have no basis in reality, but feel absolutely true in the moment. And when they finally respond 3 hours later, with a cheerful reply and an apology for being busy, you feel relief and foolishness in equal measure. Relief that nothing bad happened. Foolishness that you worked yourself into such a state over nothing. But it wasn't nothing to you. It never is. Because anxiety doesn't deal in facts. It deals in possibilities, in potential dangers, in the infinite ways things could go wrong. And your mind has become a master at generating those scenarios, at keeping you perpetually braced for disaster, at stealing your peace with threats that exist only in your imagination. You can't relax. You can't trust that things are okay even when they are. You can't stop running simulations of catastrophe. And the exhaustion of it, the constant vigilance, the never-ending preparation for dangers that rarely materialize, it drains you of the energy you need to actually live. Or maybe you've gone the other way entirely. Maybe you've felt so much for so long that you don't feel anything anymore. Numbness has become your refuge, your protection, the emotional equivalent of turning down the volume until everything becomes background noise. Someone you care about tells you good news, and you can't access joy for them. Someone shares their pain, and you can't reach compassion. You go through the motions. You say the right things. You perform the appropriate reactions. But inside, there's just emptiness, a vast blank space where feeling used to be. You tell yourself this is better. That feeling nothing is easier than feeling too much. That numbness is peace. But deep down, you know it's not, because numbness doesn't discriminate. When you shut down the painful emotions, you shut down all of them. The joy goes with the sorrow. The love goes with the fear. The aliveness goes with the hurt. And what you are left with is a kind of living death. You're breathing, moving, functioning. But you're not really here. You're watching life happen from behind glass. You're disconnected from yourself, from others, from the full spectrum of human experience that makes existence meaningful. These are the ways emotions hijack your life when you don't know how to work with them. Fear sabotages your dreams before you even start. It tells you that risk equals danger, that trying means failing, that staying where you are is the only safe choice. So you don't apply for the job. You don't start the business. You don't move to the new city. You don't pursue the relationship. You don't create the art. You don't take the chance. And years later, you look back at all the paths you didn't walk, and you wonder who you might have become if fear hadn't been making your decisions. Resentment poisons your closest bonds. It accumulates in small doses, building up over years of unspoken needs, unaddressed hurt, unexpressed truth. You smile when you're angry. You say it's fine when it's not. You accommodate when you want to assert. And that resentment doesn't disappear. It ferments. It grows. It leaks out in passive aggression, in cold silences, in the 1,000 tiny ways you withdraw from the people you love because you never learned to tell them what you actually need. Guilt keeps you trapped in obligations that aren't yours to carry. You say yes when you mean no because you can't bear to disappoint people. You sacrifice your time, your energy, your well-being to meet everyone else's needs while your own go unmet. You carry responsibility for other people's feelings, other people's choices, other people's lives, and the weight of it crushes you slowly, day by day, until you can barely remember what you wanted before you became what everyone else needed. This is the hidden cost of emotional chaos, not just the moments that feel bad, not just the reactions you regret or the anxiety that keeps you awake, but the entire life you're not living because your emotions are driving while you're trapped in the passenger seat, watching your existence unfold in ways you didn't choose and don't want but can't seem to change. The relationships that withered because you couldn't express what you truly felt. The opportunities that passed because fear convinced you that you weren't ready. The years spent performing a version of yourself that wasn't real because the real you felt too vulnerable, too much, too risky to reveal. And the loneliness of it. The deep, aching loneliness of believing you're the only one struggling this way, that everyone else has figured out how to feel normal, how to handle life, how to be okay. That your inability to control your emotions is evidence of some fundamental defect in your character. You look around, and everyone seems fine. They smile easily. They navigate social situations without spiraling into anxiety. They express anger without destroying relationships. They handle disappointment without collapsing. They feel things and move on. And you wonder what's wrong with you, why you can't do what seems to come naturally to everyone else, why you're still fighting battles you thought you'd have won by now, why, after all this time, after all this effort, you still don't feel at peace in your own skin. But here's what you need to understand. You're not alone in this struggle. You're not broken. You're not failing at being human. You're experiencing what happens when you're never taught emotional literacy in a world that demands emotional performance. When you're given complex feelings, but no instruction manual. When you're expected to navigate relationships, careers, challenges, and your own inner world without ever learning the fundamental skills of understanding and managing what moves through you. This war inside you is not a personal failure. It's a universal, human experience that demands attention, understanding, and new skills. And that's exactly what comes next. The war inside you didn't start with you. It started millions of years ago in the architecture of the human brain. It continued through your childhood, shaped by hands and voices that taught you which feelings were safe and which had to be hidden. It was reinforced by every experience that left a mark, every wound that rewired your nervous system, every message you absorbed about who you should be and what you should feel. Understanding this changes everything, because once you see where your emotional responses come from, once you trace them back to their origins, shame dissolves into clarity. Self-judgment transforms into self-compassion, and the war inside you becomes something you can finally make peace with. Let's start with your brain. Deep inside your skull, nestled in the center of your brain, sits a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. It's ancient, primitive. It existed in your ancestors long before language, long before logic, long before the parts of your brain that make you distinctly human even developed. The amygdala is a sentinel, a guard. It's constantly scanning your environment for threat and opportunity, processing information faster than your conscious mind can keep up. It sees a face, hears a tone, detects a smell, and within milliseconds, before you even realize what's happening, it's already decided whether you're safe or in danger. When it detects a threat, real or perceived, it triggers your body's alarm system. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing quickens, stress hormones flood your bloodstream, your muscles tense, ready for action. Your thinking narrows, focused only on survival. This is your fight, flight, or freeze response, and it happens automatically, involuntarily, before your rational mind even knows there's a problem. This system kept your ancestors alive. When they encountered a predator, they didn't have time to think through their options, weigh pros and cons, make rational decisions. They needed to react instantly, run, fight, hide. The ones whose amygdalas worked fastest, who felt fear most acutely and responded most quickly, were the ones who survived long enough to pass their genes to you. So you inherited a brain designed for immediate reaction, for survival in a world of physical threats, for quick decisions in life or death situations. But here's the problem. Your amygdala can't tell the difference between a predator and a critical email, between physical danger and social rejection, between a threat to your survival and a threat to your ego. It treats them all the same. It sounds the same alarm. It floods your body with the same chemicals. It hijacks your system with the same urgency. This is why a text message from your boss saying, "We need to talk," can make your heart race like you're being chased. Why a critical comment can feel like a physical attack. Why social situations can trigger the same physiological response as actual danger. Your body is responding exactly as it was designed to respond. The problem is that the design is millions of years old, built for a world that no longer exists. But the amygdala is only part of the story. Above it, wrapped around it like layers of evolution, is your prefrontal cortex. This is the newer part of your brain, the thinking part, the part that can reason and plan and reflect. This is where you process language, make decisions, regulate your impulses, and choose your responses instead of just reacting. When your prefrontal cortex is online, engaged, and working well, it can override the amygdala's panic. It can say, "I know this feels dangerous, but it's actually just a conversation. I know this feels like rejection, but it's just someone having a bad day. I know this feels overwhelming, but I can handle it." But here's what happens when you're stressed, tired, overwhelmed, or triggered. Your prefrontal cortex goes offline. Blood flow shifts away from it toward the more primitive parts of your brain. Your capacity for rational thought diminishes. Your ability to regulate your emotions weakens, and the amygdala takes over completely. This is why you react in ways you don't understand, why you say things you don't mean, why you can't think clearly when you're upset. Your thinking brain has been temporarily shut down by your survival brain, and you're operating on instinct alone. This isn't a character flaw. This isn't weakness. This is biology. And it gets more complicated. Because your brain didn't develop in a vacuum. It was shaped by every experience you had, especially the early ones. When you were a child, your brain was extraordinarily plastic, constantly forming new connections based on what you experienced. And the people who raised you, intentionally or not, taught you which emotions were acceptable and which had to be buried. Maybe you learned that anger was dangerous, that when you got upset, the adults around you withdrew their love, punished you, or became frightening themselves. So your brain learned to suppress anger, to push it down, to fear your own rage because expressing it meant losing connection, and connection meant survival. Maybe you learned that sadness was weakness, that when you cried, you were told to toughen up, to stop being so sensitive, to get over it. So your brain learned to disconnect from grief, to numb out when pain arrived, to build walls around your heart, because vulnerability wasn't safe. Maybe you learned that your needs didn't matter, that when you asked for attention, comfort, or help, you were ignored, dismissed, or made to feel like a burden. So your brain learned to minimize your needs, to become self-sufficient to the point of isolation, to never ask for what you wanted, because asking meant disappointment. These weren't conscious lessons. They were encoded in your nervous system through repetition, through the 1,000 small interactions that taught you how to be in the world. And they became your emotional templates, the unconscious patterns that still run your responses today. This is why certain situations trigger you in ways that seem disproportionate to the actual event. Because you're not just responding to what's happening now, you're responding to what happened then. The criticism from your boss isn't just criticism. It's every time you were made to feel inadequate as a child. The rejection from a friend isn't just rejection. It's the abandonment wound that never fully healed. The conflict with your partner isn't just conflict. It's the terror you felt when love was conditional and could be withdrawn at any moment. Your nervous system remembers. And when something in the present mirrors something from the past, even vaguely, your body responds as if the old threat is happening again. Right now, in full force. This is trauma, not just the big, obvious traumas that everyone recognizes, but the small, repeated ones that rewire you just as powerfully. The emotional neglect, the chronic criticism, the unpredictable environment, the feeling of not being safe, seen or valued. These experiences don't just live in your memory. They live in your body, in your nervous system, in the hair-trigger responses that seem to come out of nowhere, but actually have a very clear origin. And then there's your environment, the world you live in now, which is working against your emotional well-being in ways you might not fully recognize. Constant stress floods your system with cortisol. This stress hormone is meant to be released in short bursts during acute danger, then return to baseline once the threat passes. But modern life doesn't work that way. The bills keep coming. The demands keep mounting. The news keeps cycling through disasters. Your phone keeps pinging with notifications. Your job keeps pushing you beyond reasonable limits. Your responsibilities keep expanding while your resources stay the same. So your cortisol stays elevated, chronically. And chronic cortisol doesn't just make you feel stressed. It shrinks your hippocampus, the part of your brain that processes memory and regulates the stress response. It weakens your prefrontal cortex, reducing your ability to think clearly and regulate emotions. It amplifies your amygdala, making you more reactive, more anxious, more prone to seeing threats everywhere. You're not imagining that everything feels harder than it used to. It is harder, because your brain is being systematically degraded by sustained stress it was never designed to handle. Social media hijacks your dopamine pathways. Every notification, every like, every new piece of content delivers a small hit of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation. Your brain starts craving these hits, checking compulsively, comparing constantly, seeking validation from strangers, measuring your worth in metrics that mean nothing and everything. And the comparison game destroys your peace. You see curated versions of other people's lives and measure them against the messy reality of your own. You feel inadequate, behind, not enough. Your baseline for what constitutes a good life inflates beyond reason, while your actual circumstances feel increasingly disappointing. Meanwhile, you're trapped in survival mode. Your body was designed for brief periods of intense stress, followed by long periods of rest and recovery. Hunt the animal, escape the danger, then rest, digest, connect, heal. But modern life doesn't give you that rhythm. You're always on, always available, always performing, always pushing. Your nervous system never gets the signal that it's safe to relax, that the danger has passed, that you can finally rest. So you stay wired, hyper-vigilant, running on stress hormones and willpower. And eventually, your system collapses into shutdown, into numbness, into depression, because you can't sustain activation indefinitely. The body protects itself by shutting down when it can't keep going. This is the environment you're trying to navigate. With a brain designed for a different world, using emotional patterns forged in childhood, carrying wounds that never fully healed. Is it any wonder you're struggling? But here's what you need to understand. Emotions are not the problem. They're not character flaws or signs of weakness. They're not evidence that something is wrong with you. They're evolutionary tools designed to keep you alive, connect you to others, and guide you toward what matters. Fear tells you to pay attention, to prepare, to protect yourself. Anger signals that a boundary has been violated, that something unjust is happening, that you need to assert yourself. Sadness indicates loss, invites reflection, pulls you inward to process and integrate what's changed. Joy points you toward what brings meaning and connection. Disgust protects you from contamination and violation. Surprise helps you adapt to new information. Every emotion serves a purpose. Every feeling carries information. The problem is not that you feel. The problem is that you were never taught how to listen to what your emotions are telling you, how to interpret their messages, how to respond with wisdom instead of just reacting on autopilot. You learn to judge your emotions instead of understand them, to suppress them instead of process them, to fight them instead of work with them. And that's why you're at war with yourself. But it doesn't have to be this way. Your emotional struggles make perfect sense given your biology, your history, and the world you navigate. Your reactions are not random or irrational. They're predictable responses to identifiable causes. And what's predictable can be understood. What can be understood can be worked with. What can be worked with can be changed. You can stop fighting yourself. You can stop judging every emotion that arises. You can stop believing that your feelings are evidence of your inadequacy. Instead, you can learn a different way, a way that honors your emotional nature while giving you the skills to navigate it with wisdom, a way that works with your brain instead of against it, a way that heals old wounds instead of constantly reopening them, a way that transforms your relationship with your emotions from war to partnership. This is where your transformation truly begins. Not with more willpower or more suppression or more trying to be different than you are, but with understanding, with compassion, with the recognition that you're not broken, you're human. And being human means feeling deeply and constantly and learning to do that with grace. Understanding where your emotions come from changes how you see yourself, but understanding alone doesn't transform how you live. For that, you need a map, a clear path from where you are to where you want to be, a framework that shows you not just the destination, but every stage of the journey and what each one feels like as you move through it. There are 5 stages of emotional freedom, 5 levels of mastery that mark your progression from chaos to command, from reactivity to wisdom, from being controlled by your feelings to working with them in partnership. You don't jump from one stage to the next overnight. You don't skip levels or shortcut the process, but you do move forward, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, sometimes in ways you don't even notice until you look back and realize how far you've come. And here's what matters most. Every stage is worthy. Every level has value. You don't have to reach the final stage to experience profound change in your life. Progress at any level transforms everything. Let's walk through each one, so you can see where you are, so you can understand where you're going, so you can recognize the signs of movement even when it feels like you're standing still. The first stage is unconscious reactivity. This is where emotions control you completely, and you don't even realize it's happening. You're angry before you know why. You're anxious before you identify the trigger. You're shut down before you understand what pushed you there. Your emotions move through you like weather systems you can't predict or prepare for, and you're just trying to survive the storm. In this stage, your life feels confusing. You keep repeating patterns you can't seem to break. You hurt people you love and don't understand why. You sabotage your own success and feel helpless to stop it. You wake up one day and realize you've been making the same mistakes for years, choosing the same toxic relationships, running from the same fears, exploding over the same triggers. The hallmark of this stage is the gap between intention and action. You genuinely want to respond differently. You promise yourself you will. You rehearse better responses in your mind. But when the moment arrives, when the emotion hits, all of that disappears. You react from instinct, from old patterns, from programming you can't access or interrupt. Later you feel regret. You apologize. You commit to change, and you mean it. But you don't have the awareness or the tools to actually do it differently next time. So the cycle continues. If you're in this stage, you might feel broken. You might believe something is fundamentally wrong with you. You might look at other people who seem to handle their emotions with ease and wonder what they have that you don't. But here's the truth. You're not broken. You're just operating from unconscious patterns. And the fact that you're hearing this, that you're seeking understanding, means you're already at the edge of something new. You're already beginning the transition to the next stage. The second stage is painful awareness. This is where you start noticing your emotional patterns, but you don't yet have the tools to change them. You see yourself snapping at your partner. You recognize the anxiety spiraling. You watch yourself withdrawing, numbing out, lashing out, and you feel powerless to intervene. This stage is frustrating, deeply frustrating, because awareness without capability feels like torture. You see the pattern unfolding. You know what's coming. You can predict exactly how this is going to go. But you can't stop it. You're watching yourself react in real time, narrating your own dysfunction, observing the damage as it happens, and you still can't choose differently. You might feel stuck here, like awareness is making things worse instead of better. Because ignorance was easier. Not knowing meant you didn't have to confront the gap between who you are and who you want to be. But now you see it clearly, and the seeing hurts. But this stage is essential. This is the doorway to change. You cannot transform what you cannot see. Awareness is not the end of the journey, but it's the necessary beginning. It's the foundation on which everything else is built. In this stage, you start asking different questions. Not, why am I like this? Or, what's wrong with me? But what's happening inside me when I react this way? What am I actually feeling beneath the anger? What need isn't being met? What old wound is this touching? You start getting curious instead of just critical. You start observing instead of just judging. And slowly, painfully, you begin to understand the architecture of your emotional experience. You map your triggers. You identify your patterns. You trace your reactions back to their origins. This takes time, and it's uncomfortable, but it's also powerful, because once you understand your patterns, once you can predict them, once you know your emotional landscape well enough to anticipate what's coming, you can begin to prepare. You can start building the skills you need. You can move toward the next stage. The third stage is active management. This is where you learn to pause between feeling and action, where you can name your emotions with accuracy, where you can choose different responses instead of defaulting to old patterns, where you start to experience real agency over how you show up in your life. In this stage, you feel the anger rising, and you breathe. You create space. You don't just react. You notice the sensation in your body, the heat in your chest, the tension in your jaw, and you pause, just for 3 seconds, just long enough to interrupt the automatic response. You notice the fear, and you move forward anyway. You feel the anxiety before the presentation, before the difficult conversation, before the risk. But instead of avoiding or numbing or spiraling, You acknowledge it. You name it. You feel it fully. And then you act from intention instead of from the feeling. You recognize the shame trying to keep you small, and you speak up anyway. You notice the old pattern activating, the voice telling you to stay quiet, to not take up space, to not risk being seen. And you override it. Not because the feeling goes away, but because you've learned that feeling, and doing are separate processes. You can feel afraid and be brave. You can feel insecure and take action. You can feel the full weight of your emotions without letting them make all your decisions. This stage requires effort. It's not effortless yet. It's not automatic. You have to remember to use your tools. You have to consciously pause, consciously name, consciously choose. Sometimes you forget. Sometimes you slip back into old patterns. Sometimes the emotion is so strong or comes so fast that you react before you can catch yourself. This is normal. This is part of the process. Mastery at this level doesn't mean perfection. It means that more often than not, you're able to intervene in your own reactivity. You're building new neural pathways. You're strengthening your prefrontal cortex. You're teaching your nervous system that there are other options besides the old automatic responses. And your life starts to change in tangible ways. Your relationships improve because you're not constantly reacting from wounds. Your work improves because anxiety doesn't paralyze you anymore. Your sense of self strengthens because you are proving to yourself over and over that you can handle what you feel. The fourth stage is integrated understanding. This is where emotional work becomes natural rather than forced, where you understand your patterns so deeply that you can predict and prepare for them, where you've built such fluency with your inner world that navigation becomes intuitive. In this stage, you know that criticism triggers your shame, so you don't wait until someone criticizes you to deal with it. You build support systems in advance. You practice self-compassion before you need it. You prepare your nervous system for what's coming so that when it arrives, you're not caught off guard. You know that conflict with your partner activates your abandonment wound. So you create agreements ahead of time about how you'll handle disagreements. You establish repair rituals. You communicate your needs before you're dysregulated. You build safety into the structure of your relationship so that when tension arises, you both have a container that can hold it. You know that high-stress periods deplete your emotional reserves. So you don't schedule difficult conversations during those times. You don't add unnecessary pressure. You protect your capacity by being strategic about what you take on and when. This level of mastery looks like wisdom. It looks like someone who knows themselves so well that they can design their life to support their emotional well-being. Who doesn't just react to problems but prevents them. Who doesn't just manage crises but creates conditions where crises are less likely to occur. At this stage, emotional work feels less like work and more like how you naturally operate. The tools you learned in stage 3 have been practiced so many times that they've become integrated into who you are. You don't have to think about pausing before you react. Your nervous system does it automatically. You don't have to remember to breathe through difficult emotions. Your body knows how. You still feel everything. The anger, the fear, the sadness, the joy. But these emotions move through you differently now. They inform you without overwhelming you. They guide you without controlling you. You've developed such trust in your ability to navigate whatever arises that you're no longer afraid of your own feelings. And then there's the 5th stage, embodied mastery. This is where emotions flow through you without controlling you, where you feel deeply without losing yourself, where you've built such profound trust in your emotional capacity that you welcome every feeling as information, as energy, as a teacher. In this stage, you don't fight your emotions anymore. You don't try to suppress them or bypass them or transcend them. You meet them with presence and curiosity. You understand that every emotion, even the uncomfortable ones, serves a purpose. That fear is protection. That anger is boundary. That sadness is integration. That joy is compass. You can be angry without being destructive. You can be afraid without being paralyzed. You can be sad without being consumed. You can be joyful without needing to protect yourself from inevitable loss. You've learned to hold complexity, to feel multiple emotions at once without needing to resolve them into something simpler, to sit with uncertainty without demanding immediate answers, to be both vulnerable and strong, both feeling and wise, both fully human and remarkably free. This doesn't mean you never struggle. It doesn't mean you've transcended your humanity or reached some permanent state of enlightenment. You still have hard days. You still get triggered. You still react poorly sometimes. But the difference is in how quickly you recognize what's happening, how gracefully you course correct, how much compassion you extend to yourself in the process. At this level, your emotional life becomes a source of strength rather than a source of suffering. Your capacity to feel deeply becomes your greatest asset instead of your biggest liability. You understand that the goal was never to stop feeling, but to feel with wisdom, to let emotions move through you like water, informing and enriching your life without flooding or controlling it. This is what each stage looks like, in your relationships, at your work, in your solitude. In stage 1, your relationships are chaotic. Your work is sabotaged by reactivity. Your solitude is filled with regret and confusion. In stage 2, you see the problems clearly but can't yet fix them, which creates frustration but also motivation. In stage 3, you're actively building new skills, and while it's effortful, you're seeing real change. In stage 4, those skills have become natural, and your life reflects the integration. In stage 5, you've achieved a level of mastery that allows you to be fully present with whatever arises. You don't have to reach stage 5 to transform your life. Stage 3 alone will revolutionize your relationships, your work, your sense of self. Stage 4 will give you a peace and confidence you've never known. But knowing all 5 stages exist gives you hope. It shows you that mastery is not perfection. It's progression. And every stage is worthy. Every level offers profound gifts. You are exactly where you need to be right now, and you're moving forward, even when it doesn't feel like it. Now that you understand the stages of mastery, you need the foundational tool that moves you from one level to the next, the technique that transforms emotional chaos into intentional living, the practice that gives you immediate control when feelings threaten to overwhelm you. It's called the 3-second reset, and it works like this. Pause, name, choose. 3 steps, 3 seconds. One moment that changes everything. This is not theory. This is not something you practice someday when you feel ready. This is the tool you use right now, in the middle of your life, when emotions are rising and old patterns are activating, and you're standing at the crossroads between reacting unconsciously and responding with intention. Let's break it down, step by step, element by element. Until you know this so well, you can use it without thinking. The first step is pause. Before you can change how you respond, you have to interrupt the automatic reaction. You have to create space between what happens to you and what you do about it, between stimulus and response, between feeling and action. This space is everything. This gap is where your power lives. But to create that space, you first have to recognize when you need it. You have to learn to read your body's signals, the physical sensations that tell you an emotion is activating before it fully takes over. Pay attention to the heat rising in your chest, that flush of warmth that spreads when anger is building. It starts small, sometimes so subtle you almost miss it. A flicker of irritation, a spark of frustration. But if you catch it early, if you notice that first whisper of heat, you can intervene before it becomes a wildfire. Notice the tension in your jaw, the way your teeth clench, your muscles tighten, your face hardens when you're stressed or upset. Your body knows you're activated before your mind does. It's preparing for conflict, bracing for impact, getting ready to fight or defend. When you feel that tension, that's your signal. That's your body telling you to pause. Feel the flutter in your stomach. That nervous, unsettled sensation when anxiety is beginning to spiral. It's not full panic yet. It's the early warning, the first ripple before the wave. Your gut is signaling danger, real or perceived, and your nervous system is starting to activate. This is the moment to pause. Recognize the tightness in your throat, that constriction, that feeling like you can't quite breathe fully, like something is stuck. It happens when you're holding back tears, swallowing words, suppressing what wants to come out. When your throat tightens, your body is telling you there's something you need to express, something you're afraid to say. Pause here. Before you explode or shut down, before you say something you'll regret or swallow something that will poison you from the inside. Once you recognize these signals, you create the pause through physical anchoring. Anchor to your breath. Take one deep breath, not 10, not a whole meditation session, just one conscious breath. In through your nose for a count of 3. Hold for a count of 3. Out through your mouth for a count of 3. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the part that calms you down, that tells your body it's safe enough to think instead of just react. Press your feet into the ground, literally. Feel the floor beneath you. Feel the solid earth supporting your weight. This grounds you in your body, pulls you out of the spiral in your mind, reminds you that you're here, now, present, not drowning in the story your emotions are trying to tell. Count silently to 3. 1, 2, 3. This engages your prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain. It interrupts the amygdala's takeover. It gives your rational mind just enough space to come back online, to participate in what happens next, instead of letting your reactive brain run the show. The pause doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be obvious. No one else even has to know you're doing it. 3 seconds. That's all. 3 seconds between feeling something and acting on it. 3 seconds that change the entire trajectory of what happens next. The second step is name. Once you've created space, once you've paused, you label what you're feeling with as much accuracy as you can access in that moment. This is not optional. This is not extra. Naming emotions is one of the most powerful tools you have for reducing their intensity and transforming how they move through you. Here's why. When you're overwhelmed by emotion, your amygdala is in control and your prefrontal cortex is offline. You're all feeling, no thinking, all reaction, no reflection. But the moment you put language to what you're experiencing, The moment you say the name of the emotion, you activate your prefrontal cortex. You bring your thinking brain back online. You shift the experience from the reactive part of your brain to the part that can process, understand, and choose. Neuroscientists call this affect labeling, and research shows it literally dampens the amygdala's intensity. Naming the emotion reduces its power over you. But here's the key. The more specific you are, the more effective this becomes. There's a huge difference between I'm upset and I'm feeling disappointed because my expectations weren't met. And underneath that disappointment is fear that I'm not valued. The first is vague, generic. It doesn't give you any information to work with. The second is precise. It unpacks layers. It tells you what's really happening beneath the surface feeling. When you name emotions accurately, you transform confusion into clarity. You take something that feels overwhelming and shapeless, and you give it definition, boundaries, a place in your awareness that you can examine instead of just drown in. Let's practice this with real scenarios. Your colleague takes credit for your idea in a meeting. You feel a surge of something hot and intense. Pause. Breathe. Now name it. I'm angry, and beneath the anger, I'm hurt. And beneath the hurt, I'm afraid that my contributions don't matter, that I'm invisible, that I'll never get the recognition I deserve. See how that works. You started with the surface emotion, anger, and you went deeper. You found the hurt underneath, and then you found the fear driving everything. Now you have information. Now you know what you're actually dealing with, and that clarity changes what you do next. Your partner says something critical, and your chest tightens. Pause. Feel your feet on the ground. Name what's happening. I'm feeling defensive, and underneath that, I'm feeling shame. And underneath the shame, there's a belief that I'm not good enough, that I'm failing, that love is conditional on my performance. Again, you're unpacking layers. You're not just reacting to the surface emotion. You're understanding the deeper structure, and that understanding gives you power. You're about to give a presentation, and your stomach is churning. Pause. Take that breath. Name it. I'm nervous. I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid I'll mess up and people will think less of me. But I'm also excited. There's energy here. There's anticipation. This matters to me, and that's why I feel so much. Notice how naming can hold complexity. You don't have to reduce your experience to one simple emotion. You can acknowledge that you're feeling multiple things at once. Fear and excitement, nervousness and anticipation. The naming makes space for all of it. The more you practice this, the faster and more natural it becomes. At first, you might need time to dig beneath the surface to figure out what you're really feeling. But eventually, your awareness becomes so refined that you can name emotions in real time, even as they're arising. And every time you name what you feel, you're building emotional granularity. You're expanding your vocabulary for inner experience. You're training your brain to differentiate between dozens of distinct emotional states instead of lumping everything into broad categories like good or bad, happy or sad. People with high emotional granularity, people who can name their feelings with precision, have better mental health, stronger relationships, and more effective coping strategies. Because they understand what they're working with, they have clarity where others have confusion. The third step is choose. This is where everything you've learned comes together. This is where you reclaim your agency. This is the moment you prove to yourself that feeling and acting are separate processes. that you can experience intense emotions without being controlled by them. After you've paused, after you've named what you're feeling and why, you choose your response, consciously, intentionally, in alignment with who you want to be and what the situation actually requires, not just what your emotion is demanding. Let's walk through this with real-life applications so you can see exactly how it works. You're driving and someone cuts you off. Anger flashes hot and immediate. Your hands tighten on the wheel. Your jaw clenches. Old you would have honked, maybe yelled, maybe chased them down to make a point. But now you pause. You feel your feet pressing into the floorboard. You take one breath. You name it. I'm angry. I feel disrespected. My space was violated. And then you choose. You choose to let it go. Because getting into a road rage incident doesn't serve you. Because this stranger's careless driving doesn't deserve to ruin your day. Because you have the power to feel angry and still drive calmly. You're in a heated argument with your partner. They say something that cuts deep, that hits an old wound you've been carrying for years. Fury rises. You want to strike back, to hurt them the way they hurt you, to say the thing that will land hardest. But you pause. You press your feet into the ground. You take that breath. You name what's happening. I'm furious. I'm hurt. This touched my abandonment wound. I'm scared that they don't really love me, that I'm too much, that I'll be left. And then you choose. You choose to speak from the wound instead of from the weapon. You say, "That hurt me." When you said that, it made me feel like I don't matter to you. I need to take a break and come back to this conversation when I'm calmer. You create space instead of damage, connection instead of destruction. Rejection lands in your inbox, the job you wanted, the opportunity you prepared for, the thing you hoped would change everything. They chose someone else. Disappointment crashes over you, then shame, then the voice telling you that you're not good enough, that you'll never make it, that you should just give up. You pause. You sit down. You feel the chair supporting you. You breathe. You name it. I'm devastated. I'm disappointed. I'm feeling rejected and inadequate. I'm afraid this means something permanent about my worth. And then you choose. You choose to feel the disappointment fully without making it mean you're a failure. You choose to grieve this loss without abandoning your dreams. You choose to reach out to someone who loves you instead of isolating in your shame. You choose to treat yourself with compassion instead of criticism. Anxiety wakes you at 3 in the morning. Your mind is already spinning, catastrophizing, building worst-case scenarios. Your heart is racing. Your body feels wired. You want to reach for your phone, to distract yourself, to escape the discomfort. But you pause. You stay in bed. You press your hands against your chest, feeling your heartbeat. You breathe slowly, intentionally. You name what's happening. I'm anxious. My nervous system is activated. There's no actual danger right now. This is my brain trying to prepare for problems that haven't happened and might never happen. And then you choose. You choose not to engage with the anxious thoughts. You choose to focus on your breath, on the sensation of your body in bed, on the present moment instead of the imagined future. You choose to trust that you can handle tomorrow when tomorrow actually arrives. This is the 3-second reset in action. Pause. Name. Choose. It's simple, but it's not easy, especially at first. Your old patterns have momentum. They've been running automatically for years, maybe decades. They won't surrender without a fight. But every time you use this tool, you're building new neural pathways. You're strengthening your prefrontal cortex. You're teaching your nervous system that there are other options, better options, than the automatic reactions you've been defaulting to. And gradually, this 3-step process becomes second nature. It becomes how you operate. It becomes the bridge between emotional chaos and intentional living. You still feel everything: the anger, the fear, the hurt, the disappointment. But now you have space around those feelings. Now you have language for them. Now you have choice in how you respond. This is the tool that changes everything. This is what moves you from stage 1 to stage 3, from unconscious reactivity to active management. Use it today. Use it right now. The next time you feel emotion rising, remember: pause, name, choose. 3 seconds, 3 steps, 1 transformed life. The 3-second reset is your foundation. It's the tool you reach for in the moment when emotions are rising and you need immediate control. But mastery requires more than one technique. It requires a full arsenal of practices, each designed for different situations, different depths, different aspects of your emotional life. Think of it like learning to play an instrument. First, you learn the basic chords. That's your 3-second reset. But to make real music, to create something beautiful and complex, you need to expand your repertoire. You need advanced techniques. You need to understand the deeper mechanics. You need multiple tools working together in harmony. This is where you build that comprehensive toolkit, where you learn practices that take you beyond managing emotions in the moment and into truly understanding, transforming, and working with them at every level. Let's start with emotional archaeology. Most of the time, the feeling you're aware of is not the whole story. It's just the top layer, the surface, the emotion that's easiest to access or most socially acceptable to acknowledge. But underneath that surface feeling, there are deeper layers, older wounds, more vulnerable truths. And if you stop at the surface, if you only work with what's obvious, you'll keep hitting the same walls over and over. Emotional archaeology is the practice of digging beneath surface feelings to discover the layered truth underneath. When you notice an emotion, any emotion, you ask yourself 3 questions. What else am I feeling? What's beneath this? What am I really afraid of? Let's say you're angry at your partner for being late. Again, you feel irritation, frustration, maybe rage building. That's real, that's valid, but it's not the whole truth. So you dig. What else am I feeling? Hurt, disappointment. What's beneath the anger, fear? What am I really afraid of? That I don't matter enough for them to prioritize me. That I'm always going to be an afterthought. That love isn't safe because people leave, or they stay but check out, and either way I end up alone. See how that changes everything? The surface emotion was anger, but the deeper truth was fear and an old abandonment wound. When you understand that, when you can name that, you can have a completely different conversation. You're not attacking them for being late. You're sharing the vulnerable truth about what their lateness triggers in you. Shame often hides under rage. When you explode at someone, when you lash out with disproportionate intensity, check underneath. There's usually shame there. Shame about feeling powerless, about being seen as inadequate, about not measuring up. The rage is protection. The shame is the wound. Grief disguises itself as numbness. When you can't feel anything, when the world seems flat and colorless, when you're disconnected from everyone and everything, don't just accept the numbness. Dig at ya beneath it. Often there's grief underneath that your system couldn't process. loss that felt too big to feel. So your nervous system shut down to protect you. But the grief is still there, waiting. Vulnerability masquerades as defensiveness. When someone offers feedback and you immediately justify, explain, or counterattack, pause. What's beneath that automatic defense? Usually it's vulnerability, the fear of being seen as flawed, the terror that if they really knew you, they'd leave. So you armor up, you protect. But the vulnerability underneath is what actually needs attention. Practice this archaeology regularly, not just in crisis moments, but as a daily practice of self-inquiry. Journal through the layers. When you write, "I'm frustrated with my job," don't stop there. Keep going. What else? What's beneath that? What are you really afraid of? Follow the thread until you reach something that feels true in your body, something that makes you want to cry, or hide, or finally breathe. Now let's talk about somatic awareness. Your body knows before your mind does. Emotions live in your tissues before they reach your conscious thoughts. Your shoulders carry stress. Your gut signals danger. Your heart rate tells the truth when your thoughts lie. Most people live entirely in their heads. They think their way through life, analyzing, strategizing, intellectualizing their feelings instead of actually feeling them. But your body is a source of profound wisdom. It's constantly sending you signals, giving you information, telling you what's true. You just have to learn how to listen. Start with body scanning. This is a practice you can do anywhere, anytime. You don't need special equipment or a quiet room. You just need a few minutes and your attention. Close your eyes if you can. If not, soften your gaze. Take a breath. Then slowly move your awareness through your body, starting at the top of your head and moving down. Don't judge what you find. Don't try to fix anything. Just notice. Notice the tension in your forehead, the tightness in your jaw, the weight in your shoulders, the knot in your stomach, the shakiness in your hands, the heaviness in your chest, the constriction in your throat, the weakness in your legs. Each of these sensations is emotional information encoded in your body. Your shoulders carry the weight of responsibility you've taken on. Your gut is processing threat, real or perceived. Your chest holds grief or love or longing. Your throat wants to speak truth you've been swallowing. Once you locate the sensation, stay with it. Breathe into it. Ask it what it's trying to tell you. This isn't metaphorical. Your body will answer. Not in words, but in images, in memories, in knowing. When you find emotional tension held in your body, you can release it physically. Shake out your hands. Roll your shoulders. Stretch your jaw wide, and then release it. Place your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat. Press your feet firmly into the ground. Move your body in ways that discharge the energy trapped in your tissues. Sometimes, emotions need to move through you physically before they can fully process. Crying releases grief. Screaming into a pillow releases rage. Dancing releases joy and anxiety and everything in between. Your body knows how to metabolize feelings if you let it. Next, emotional rehearsal. You don't have to wait until difficult situations happen to learn how to navigate them. You can prepare. You can practice. You can pre-experience the emotions and plan your grounded response before the pressure of the actual moment. Think of a challenging situation coming up. A difficult conversation with your boss. A confrontation with a family member. A presentation to people whose opinions matter. A decision you've been avoiding. Now mentally walk through it. Not just what you'll say, but what you'll feel. Imagine the scenario unfolding. Feel the emotions that arise, the anxiety in your stomach, the defensiveness in your chest, the fear of judgment, the impulse to shut down or lash out. Stay with those feelings in your imagination. Don't run from them. Don't skip ahead to the resolution. Feel them fully, safely, in the rehearsal space. Then apply your tools. Pause. Name what you're feeling. Choose how you want to respond. Practice the grounded version of yourself, showing up in this difficult moment. This does two things. First, it reduces the shock and intensity when the actual situation happens. Your nervous system has already experienced it once, so it's not completely new. Second, it builds neural pathways for your desired response. You're literally training your brain to react differently by rehearsing the new pattern. Athletes visualize their performance before competition. Actors rehearse scenes before the show. You can do the same with emotional challenges. You can practice being the person you want to be before the test arrives. Now, let's talk about reframing. The stories you tell yourself about your emotions shape how you experience them and what you do with them. If you tell yourself, "I'm broken," you'll relate to your feelings as evidence of your brokenness. If you tell yourself, "I'm healing," you'll relate to the same feelings as part of your growth. Reframing is the art of transforming emotional narratives from disempowering to empowering. "I'm broken" becomes "I'm healing." You're not damaged beyond repair. You're in process. You're doing the work. Every moment of struggle is actually a moment of transformation. "I can't handle this" becomes "This is hard and I'm doing it anyway." You don't have to feel capable to be capable. You don't have to feel confident to be brave. You're handling it right now, even if it doesn't feel like it. "I'm too sensitive" becomes "I feel deeply, and that's my strength." The culture tells you that feeling too much is a problem, but depth of feeling is actually your capacity for empathy, for connection, for creativity, for knowing what matters. It's not a flaw, it's a gift that needs honoring, not fixing. "I always mess up" becomes "I'm learning and growing through trial and error." You're not failing repeatedly. You're gathering data. Every mistake teaches you something. Every misstep shows you what doesn't work, so you can find what does. "My emotions control me" becomes "I'm learning to work with my emotions as partners." You're not at war with yourself. You're in relationship with yourself. And like any relationship, it takes time to learn each other's language, to build trust, to find your rhythm. Pay attention to the stories you repeat to yourself, the internal narrative running in the background. When you catch yourself in a disempowering story, pause, reframe it. Find the version that's still true but opens possibility instead of closing it. Finally, emotional expression. Some emotions need to move through you, not just be understood or managed. They need outlet. They need release. They need to be expressed in ways that transform their energy from internal pressure into external creation or connection. Journaling that excavates rather than just records. Don't write, "I had a bad day." Write until you understand why. Write through the layers. Write what you can't say out loud. Write what you don't want to admit even to yourself. Write until something shifts, until clarity emerges, until the pressure releases. Movement practices that let your body express what words cannot touch. Dance alone in your room. Run until the anxiety burns off. Punch a heavy bag. Do yoga that invites you to feel instead of just stretch. Shake, stomp. Move energy through your body that's been stuck there too long. Creative expression that transforms pain into meaning. Paint your grief. Sing your longing. Write poetry from your rage. Build something with your hands. Create beauty from your brokenness. Turn your story into art that might help someone else who's walking the same path. Conversations with trusted allies who can hold space for your truth. Not people who fix or advise or minimize, but people who can sit with you in your pain, your confusion, your complexity, who can witness your emotions without needing to change them, who can say, "I see you, I'm here, you're not alone." Each of these tools serves a different purpose. Emotional archaeology helps you understand the layers beneath the surface. Somatic awareness connects you to the wisdom in your body. Emotional rehearsal prepares you for challenges before they arrive. Reframing transforms disempowering narratives. Emotional expression gives feelings healthy outlets. Together, they create emotional flexibility and resilience. They give you multiple ways to work with whatever arises. They build a relationship with your emotional life that's collaborative instead of combative. You don't have to master all of these at once. Start with one, practice it until it feels natural, then add another. Gradually, over time, these practices integrate into who you are and how you move through the world. This is your arsenal. These are your tools. And with them, you're not just managing emotions anymore. You're transforming your entire relationship with your inner world. Tools and techniques will only take you so far. You can master the 3-second reset, build your emotional arsenal, understand every layer of your inner world, and still find yourself struggling if the foundation beneath all of it is unstable. Emotional mastery doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not something you achieve through willpower alone or practice in isolation from the rest of your life. It's built on foundational elements that either support your growth or undermine it every single day. These foundations are not luxury items. They're not things you get to later, after you've fixed everything else. They are the soil in which emotional mastery takes root. Without them, techniques become temporary fixes. With them, transformation becomes inevitable. Let's start with the most fundamental one: sleep. You cannot regulate your emotions when you're sleep-deprived. It's not a matter of trying harder or being more disciplined. It's biology. When you don't sleep enough, your brain literally cannot function the way it needs to for emotional stability. Sleep deprivation shrinks your prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking, impulse control, and emotional regulation. It's your wise elder, the part that can override reactive impulses and choose thoughtful responses. When you're exhausted, this part goes offline. It weakens, it loses its ability to manage the more primitive parts of your brain. At the same time, sleep deprivation amplifies your amygdala, the threat detection center, the panic button. When you're tired, your amygdala becomes hyperactive, seeing danger everywhere, overreacting to minor stressors, treating small problems like major crises. This is why everything feels harder when you're exhausted, why minor frustrations become catastrophes, why you snap at people you love over nothing, why anxiety spirals out of control, why you can't access the emotional tools you know intellectually that you have. Your brain is impaired. Not metaphorically, literally. Studies show that after 24 hours without sleep, your cognitive function is equivalent to being legally intoxicated. You wouldn't try to drive drunk and expect to do it well. You can't navigate complex emotional situations on 4 hours of sleep and expect to show up as your best self. Proper rest looks like 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night. Not just time in bed scrolling your phone, but actual sleep in a dark room, at a consistent time, with a wind-down routine that signals to your nervous system that it's safe to let go. You might be thinking you're too busy, that you have too much to do, that sleep is a luxury you can't afford. But here's the truth. You can't afford not to sleep. Every hour of sleep you sacrifice costs you exponentially in emotional dysregulation, poor decisions, damaged relationships, and decreased productivity. You're not gaining time by sleeping less. You're losing capacity. Prioritize it. Protect it. Treat it as non-negotiable. Because without adequate sleep, every other tool and practice you're learning becomes infinitely harder to access. Now let's talk about nutrition and the gut-brain connection. Your gut and your brain are in constant communication. The bacteria living in your digestive system, your microbiome, produce neurotransmitters that directly affect your mood. In fact, 90% of your body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter associated with happiness and emotional stability, is produced in your gut. This means what you eat doesn't just fuel your body. It shapes your emotional experience. Blood sugar crashes trigger anxiety. When you skip meals or eat foods that spike your blood sugar and then drop it rapidly, your body interprets that drop as danger. It releases stress hormones. Your heart races. Your hands shake. You feel panicked. Not because something threatening is happening, but because your blood sugar is unstable and your body thinks it's starving. If you struggle with anxiety, look at when you eat and what you're eating. Are you going long stretches without food? Are you living on coffee and sugar? Are you skipping breakfast and then wondering why you're anxious by mid-morning? Your anxiety might not be purely psychological. It might be physiological, driven by blood sugar dysregulation. Inflammatory foods fuel depression. Processed foods, excess sugar, trans fats, foods you're sensitive to but keep eating anyway. All of these create inflammation in your body, and inflammation doesn't stay in your gut. It travels to your brain. It affects neurotransmitter production. It contributes to brain fog, fatigue, and depressed mood. This doesn't mean you have to eat perfectly, but it does mean paying attention to how different foods affect your emotional state. Notice what happens when you eat whole foods versus processed ones. Notice how you feel after meals that stabilize your blood sugar versus meals that spike and crash it. Notice which foods make you feel energized and which ones make you feel sluggish and irritable. Your gut microbiome can be healed and strengthened. Eat diverse plants, include fermented foods, reduce processed foods and added sugars. Drink water. These aren't diet rules. They're emotional health practices disguised as nutrition. Next, movement. Exercise is not punishment for your body. It's medicine for your nervous system. When you experience stress, your body floods with cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones prepare you for physical action, for fighting or running. But modern stress rarely requires physical response. You're stressed about work, about relationships, about money. You feel the physiological activation, but you don't move. So those stress hormones just circulate in your system, keeping you wired, anxious, unable to relax. Physical activity metabolizes stress hormones. It burns them off. It completes the stress cycle that your body started but couldn't finish. This is why a walk can calm your anxiety. Why running can clear your head. Why yoga can help you feel grounded. You're not just distracting yourself. You're helping your body process and release what it's holding. Movement rebuilds neural pathways. It promotes neuroplasticity. It literally grows new connections in your brain. It strengthens the pathways associated with mood regulation, resilience, and emotional flexibility. Movement gives trapped emotions a way out. Sometimes you can't think your way through a feeling. Sometimes you can't talk your way through it. Sometimes it just needs to move through your body. Dance releases what words can't express. Weightlifting channels rage productively. Swimming lets grief flow. Your body knows how to process emotion through movement if you let it. You don't need a gym membership or an hour every day. You need to move your body regularly in ways that feel good. Walk, stretch, dance in your kitchen, do 10 minutes of yoga, play with your kids, garden. Anything that gets you out of your head and into your body. Anything that moves energy through your system. Now, environmental design. Your surroundings shape your emotional state more than you realize. You can do all the internal work in the world, but if your environment is constantly triggering stress, you're fighting an uphill battle. Clutter creates mental chaos. Visual clutter overwhelms your senses and makes it harder for your brain to focus and relax. You might not consciously notice it, but your nervous system does. Every unfinished task represented by that pile of papers. Every decision delayed represented by those items without a home. It all creates low-level stress that accumulates throughout the day. You don't need a perfect, minimalist space. But you do need areas where you can rest without visual noise, where your eyes can land without encountering chaos. Create pockets of calm in your environment, clear surfaces, organized spaces, places where your nervous system can actually relax. Natural light influences mood profoundly. Exposure to sunlight regulates your circadian rhythm, boosts serotonin production, and reduces symptoms of depression. If you're spending all day in artificial light, if you're not getting outside, if your living space is dark, you're making emotional regulation harder than it needs to be. Get outside during daylight hours, even for 10 minutes. Open your curtains. Sit by a window. Prioritize natural light exposure, especially in the morning. Your mood will shift. The media you consume programs your emotional baseline. If you're scrolling through outrage and disaster before bed, if you're watching violent or disturbing content regularly, if you're immersed in negative news cycles all day, you're training your nervous system to stay in threat mode. You're feeding your brain a steady diet of fear and anger and expecting it not to affect you. But it does. Curate what you consume. Notice how different content makes you feel. Notice what energizes you versus what depletes you. Choose intentionally instead of passively consuming whatever the algorithm feeds you. This extends to relationship curation. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. You cannot grow surrounded by people who are invested in keeping you small. You cannot master your emotions while constantly being triggered by relationships that exploit your wounds, rather than honor your growth. Some people celebrate your progress. They witness your struggle with compassion. They hold space for your complexity. They encourage your evolution, even when it means you're becoming someone different than who they've known. Other people feel threatened by your growth. They undermine your efforts. They mock your attempts at change. They pull you back into old patterns because your transformation makes them uncomfortable. They need you to stay stuck because your stuckness makes them feel better about their own. You need to know the difference, and you need to be willing to create distance from relationships that are actively harming your emotional health. This doesn't always mean cutting people out completely. Sometimes it means establishing boundaries, saying no to protect your peace, limiting your exposure, choosing what you share and what you keep private, creating space for solitude and reflection without feeling guilty about it. Boundaries are not walls. They're not rejection. They're clarifying what you can and cannot tolerate in your life while you're doing this deep work. They're honoring your capacity. They're protecting your energy so you can invest it in your healing instead of constantly managing other people's dysfunction. Surround yourself with people who are doing their own work, who understand what it means to struggle and grow, who can hold complexity, who don't need you to be perfect or fixed or constantly okay. Find your people. Cultivate those relationships. They're not just nice to have, they're essential. Finally, purpose and meaning. Emotional mastery becomes exponentially easier when you're connected to something larger than yourself. When your suffering has context, when your pain is in service of something that matters, when your growth contributes to something beyond just your own comfort. This might be service, helping others who are struggling with what you've struggled with, turning your wounds into wisdom that can guide someone else through the darkness, contributing to causes that align with your values. This might be creativity, making art that expresses what you've lived through, writing stories that give voice to your experience, building something that didn't exist before you, decided to create it. This might be spirituality, connecting to something transcendent, whatever that means for you, finding your place in something larger and more enduring than your individual struggles, accessing a sense of meaning that holds you when nothing else can. This might be contribution, using your gifts in service of something you believe in, dedicating your energy to work that matters, leaving the world better than you found it. When you're connected to purpose, your emotions don't disappear, but they're held in a larger container. Your anxiety about failure matters less when you're focused on the contribution you're making. Your grief about loss transforms when you're creating meaning from the pain. Your anger about injustice becomes fuel for change instead of poison in your system. Purpose gives you a reason to do the hard work of emotional mastery, not just so you can feel better, but so you can show up more fully for what matters to you, so you can be of service, so you can create, so you can love with your whole heart without being destroyed by it. These are the foundations: sleep, nutrition, movement, environment, relationships, purpose. They're not extra. They're not what you focus on after you've mastered your emotions. They're what makes emotional mastery possible in the first place. Tend to them. Protect them. Build your life around them. Because techniques alone will fail you without solid ground beneath your feet. But with these foundations in place, transformation isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The practices you've been learning are not just psychological techniques or motivational concepts. They're grounded in neuroscience, backed by decades of research, validated by studies that reveal exactly how and why they work. Understanding this science doesn't just satisfy intellectual curiosity. It builds confidence. It removes mystery. It shows you that transformation is not magic or wishful thinking. It's biology in action. Let's start with neuroplasticity, the foundation of everything you're doing. Your brain is not fixed. It's not hardwired. It's not permanently programmed by your past. For most of human history, scientists believed that the adult brain was essentially unchangeable, that neural connections formed in childhood and adolescence were permanent. But decades of research have proven this completely wrong. Your brain is plastic, malleable, constantly reshaping itself based on your experiences, your thoughts, your behaviors, and your attention. Every time you pause instead of react, you're not just choosing a better response in that moment. You're literally rewiring your brain. You're strengthening new neural pathways and weakening old ones. Neurons that fire together, wire together. This is Hebb's law, and it's the mechanism behind all learning, all change, all transformation. When you practice the 3-second reset, when you pause between stimulus and response, you're activating your prefrontal cortex instead of letting your amygdala run the show. The first time you do this, it's hard. The neural pathway for this new response barely exists. It's like cutting a path through dense forest with a machete. It takes effort, concentration, deliberate choice. But the second time you do it, the path is slightly clearer. The 100th time, it's a trail. The 1000th time, it's a road. Eventually, with enough repetition, this new response becomes automatic. Not because you're trying so hard anymore, but because you've built the neural infrastructure that makes it natural. At the same time, the old reactive pathways are weakening. Every time you choose not to use them, they degrade slightly. The connection between trigger and automatic reaction becomes less automatic. The pattern that felt inevitable becomes optional. This is pruning, and it's just as important as building new connections. You are reshaping your brain's architecture through choice and repetition. This is not metaphor. This is measurable, observable change in neural structure and function. Now let's talk about the autonomic nervous system and polyvagal theory, developed by Stephen Porges. Your nervous system has 3 primary states, and understanding them explains why you react the way you do in different situations. The first state is ventral vagal, or social engagement. This is your baseline when you feel safe. Your heart rate is steady. Your breathing is calm. Your facial muscles are relaxed. Your voice has natural prosody. In this state, you can think clearly, connect with others, regulate your emotions, and access your full cognitive capacity. This is where you want to be most of the time. When your nervous system detects threat, real or perceived, it shifts into the second state, sympathetic activation or mobilization. This is fight or flight. Your heart rate increases. Adrenaline and cortisol flood your system. Your muscles tense. Your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Blood flow shifts away from your prefrontal cortex toward your limbs, preparing you for action. In this state, emotional regulation is extremely difficult because your thinking brain is offline. You're running on survival instinct. If the threat is overwhelming, if fight or flight won't work, your nervous system shifts into the third state, dorsal vagal or shutdown. This is freeze or collapse. Your heart rate drops. You feel numb, disconnected, foggy. You might dissociate, feeling like you're watching yourself from outside your body. This is your body's last-ditch protection mechanism when nothing else will save you. In this state, you're not just unable to regulate emotions, you can barely access them at all. Here's what matters. These shifts happen automatically, without your conscious control. Your nervous system is constantly scanning your environment for cues of safety or danger, a process called neuroception. It's making these assessments faster than your conscious mind can process. But once you understand these states, once you can recognize which one you're in, you gain the power to guide yourself back to balance. When you notice signs of sympathetic activation, the racing heart and shallow breathing, you can use tools that activate your ventral vagal system. Deep breathing, grounding techniques, safe connection with another person. These aren't just feel-good practices. They're biological interventions that shift your nervous system state. When you notice dorsal shutdown, the numbness and disconnection, you can use gentle movement, orienting to your surroundings, or progressive muscle activation to bring yourself back online. You're not trying to force your way out. You're working with your nervous system's natural capacity to shift between states when given the right cues. Your prefrontal cortex plays a crucial role in all of this. Neuroscientist Dan Siegel describes the prefrontal cortex as the integrator, the part of your brain that can observe emotions without being consumed by them, that can hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, that can choose responses based on values instead of just reacting to stimuli. When your prefrontal cortex is strong and active, it can regulate the amygdala's alarm signals. It can say, "I see that you're scared, but we're actually safe. I see that you're angry, but attacking right now will make things worse." It acts as the wise elder, tempering the reactive impulses of the more primitive parts of your brain. But the prefrontal cortex needs regular strengthening. Practices like mindfulness, meditation, and naming emotions all enhance prefrontal cortex function. Every time you label an emotion accurately, you're activating this part of your brain. Every time you pause before reacting, you're strengthening its capacity to override automatic responses. This brings us to emotional granularity, research pioneered by Lisa Feldman Barrett. Emotional granularity is your ability to differentiate between similar emotional states with precision. Low granularity means you experience emotions in broad, undifferentiated categories: good or bad, happy or sad, stressed or fine. High granularity means you can distinguish between dozens of distinct emotional states: frustrated versus disappointed, anxious versus nervous, content versus peaceful, irritated versus enraged. Research shows that people with high emotional granularity have significantly better mental health outcomes. They experience less anxiety and depression. They cope more effectively with stress. They have stronger, more satisfying relationships. They recover faster from difficult emotions. Why? Because precision gives you options. When you can only say, "I feel bad," you have no information to work with. When you can say, "I feel disappointed because my expectations weren't met," and beneath that is anxiety about whether I'm valued, you know exactly what you're working with and what might help. This is why naming emotions is so powerful. It's not just a cognitive exercise. It's building your emotional vocabulary, expanding your granularity, giving yourself the precision that leads to better outcomes. Now let's discuss the window of tolerance, a concept developed by Dan Siegel. Your window of tolerance is the zone where you can process emotions and experiences effectively. When you're within this window, you can think clearly, feel without being overwhelmed, and respond flexibly to whatever arises. Your nervous system is regulated. Your prefrontal cortex is online. You have access to your full range of capacities. When you're pushed outside this window, you enter either hyperarousal or hypoarousal. Hyperarousal is the sympathetic state: anxiety, panic, rage, overwhelm. Hypoarousal is the dorsal state: numbness, disconnection, depression, shutdown. In either state, your capacity to process emotions and experiences is severely compromised. Everyone's window is different. Some people have wide windows, able to handle significant stress before becoming dysregulated. Others have narrow windows, easily tipped into hyperarousal or hypoarousal by relatively minor triggers. Your window is shaped by your genetics, your early experiences, your trauma history, and your current life circumstances. But here's the good news: your window can expand. Every time you successfully navigate a challenging emotion, every time you use your tools to stay regulated or return to regulation, you're expanding your capacity. You're teaching your nervous system that it can handle more without tipping into dysregulation. Learning to recognize when you're approaching the edge of your window before you're pushed outside it is crucial. You start noticing the early warning signs, the slight increase in heart rate, the beginning of racing thoughts, the first hints of numbness. When you catch these signals early, you can use your tools proactively, keeping yourself within your window instead of having to climb back into it after you've been pushed out. Let's explore attachment theory and how it shapes your emotional templates. The research is clear. Your early relational experiences, particularly with primary caregivers, create templates for how you relate to others and regulate emotions throughout your life. If you experienced secure attachment, where caregivers were consistently responsive, attuned, and safe, you likely developed confidence in relationships and effective emotional regulation strategies. But if you experienced insecure attachment, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, you likely developed patterns that made sense then but cause problems now. Maybe you learned that expressing needs led to rejection, so you became self-sufficient to the point of isolation. Maybe you learned that love was inconsistent, so you became hypervigilant in relationships, constantly scanning for signs of abandonment. Maybe you learned that emotions were dangerous, so you developed elaborate strategies to suppress or avoid them. Bessel van der Kolk's groundbreaking work on trauma shows how these early experiences don't just live in memory. They live in your body, in your nervous system, in automatic patterns that activate without conscious thought. This is why you might react to your partner's innocent comment as if it's a threat. Your nervous system remembers when similar tones or situations preceded abandonment or harm, and it's trying to protect you based on old data. But, and this is crucial, what feels personal is actually predictable. Your reactions make perfect sense given your history, and what is predictable can be changed, not by erasing your past, but by creating new experiences that teach your nervous system different patterns, by building earned secure attachment through relationships that are consistently safe, by proving to your body through repeated experience that the old threats are not present now. This is why relationships are so important in healing, why therapy works, why safe, attuned connection with others can rewire attachment patterns that were formed in unsafe, misattuned relationships. Your brain is plastic. Your nervous system can learn new patterns. The templates from childhood are influential, but not permanent. All of this science points to one empowering truth. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are a complex biological system responding exactly as you were designed to respond, given your genetics, your history, and your environment. Your amygdala is doing its job, scanning for threat to keep you alive. Your autonomic nervous system is shifting between states based on safety cues. Your prefrontal cortex is working as hard as it can with the resources it has. Your emotional patterns are logical responses to the experiences that shaped you. The struggle you've faced is not evidence of personal failure. It's evidence that you're human, that you have a nervous system shaped by evolution and experience, that you're navigating a modern world with ancient biology. But now you have knowledge. You understand the mechanics. You see how the system works, and that understanding gives you power. You know that your brain can change through practice. You know that your nervous system can be guided back to regulation. You know that your window of tolerance can expand. You know that your attachment patterns can be rewired through new relational experiences. You know that naming emotions strengthens your prefrontal cortex. You know that your reactions are predictable and therefore manageable. This is not mystery anymore. This is not fate or personality or unchangeable character. This is neurobiology. And neurobiology responds to intervention, to practice, to repeated experience in new directions. You have the tools, you have the knowledge, you have the biological capacity for transformation. Now you just need to trust the process and do the work. Your brain will do the rest. Understanding the science of transformation gives you confidence in the process. But knowledge alone doesn't prepare you for the moments when life delivers its hardest tests, when everything falls apart at once, when the pressure is so intense that all your tools feel distant and inaccessible, when your nervous system is screaming and your world is burning and you're supposed to somehow remember to pause, name, and choose. This is where mastery is proven. Not in the calm moments when you're rested and regulated, but in the fire, under pressure, when it matters most and feels hardest. Let's start with acute stress, the moment when crisis hits and multiple things collapse simultaneously. You lose your job, not because you did anything wrong, but because the company downsized and your position was eliminated. You're still processing this news, still feeling the shock and fear about how you'll pay bills when your partner comes home angry. They're frustrated about something unrelated, but their tone is sharp, their words are cutting, and now you're dealing with relationship conflict on top of sudden unemployment. Your child wakes up with a fever, high enough to be concerning. You need to take them to the doctor, but you don't have health insurance anymore because it was tied to your job. You haven't slept in 2 days because anxiety has been keeping you awake, rehearsing worst-case scenarios, and now your body is running on fumes and stress hormones. This is acute stress, multiple crises converging. Your nervous system wants to spiral into panic or shut down completely. Every tool you've learned feels impossible to access. You can barely remember your own name, let alone emotional regulation techniques. But this is exactly when you need them most. And here's how you apply them when your world is burning. First, you recognize what's happening. You name it out loud or in your mind. I'm in acute stress. Multiple things are hitting at once. My nervous system is overwhelmed. This makes sense. I'm not falling apart. I'm having a normal response to abnormal pressure. This naming alone creates a tiny bit of space, a fraction of distance between you and the chaos. You're not the chaos. You're the person experiencing the chaos. And that distinction matters. Next, you stabilize your nervous system with the most basic tool you have: breath. Not elaborate breathing exercises. Just one conscious breath, in for 3 counts, out for 3 counts. You do this while standing, while sitting, while talking to your child, while looking at your partner. You breathe because it's the one thing you can control when everything else feels uncontrollable. Then you triage. You cannot handle everything at once. You choose the most pressing thing and focus there. Your child needs medical attention. That's first. Everything else waits. You tell your partner, I hear that you're upset, and we need to talk, but right now, I need to focus on getting our child to the doctor. Can we revisit this in a few hours? You're not avoiding. You're prioritizing. You reach for your body's wisdom. You notice where tension is building. You shake out your hands while you're waiting in the doctor's office. You roll your shoulders while you're on hold with insurance. You press your feet into the ground while you're having the difficult conversation with your partner later. These micro-movements keep you from freezing or fragmenting. They keep energy moving through your system instead of getting trapped. And here's the crucial part. You practice good enough emotional management. You don't have to be perfect under pressure. You don't have to execute every tool flawlessly. You just have to be slightly better than your old patterns. That's enough to change everything. Maybe you do snap at your partner once, but instead of spiraling into a full argument, you catch yourself after 3 sentences instead of 30. You pause. You say, "I'm sorry. I'm overwhelmed and I'm taking it out on you." That's not fair. That's growth. That's mastery under pressure. Not perfect, but better. Maybe you do feel panic rising while dealing with your child's illness. But instead of catastrophizing for hours, you spiral for 10 minutes and then use your tools to bring yourself back. You name the fear. You remind yourself that you can handle the next step, even if you can't see the whole path. That's enough. Now let's talk about chronic pressure, the grinding stress of ongoing challenges that test endurance rather than immediate reaction. You're caring for a parent with dementia while working full-time, every day for months, maybe years. There's no end date, no moment when you can finally rest and recover. You're just in it, day after day, watching someone you love disappear gradually, making impossible decisions, managing your own grief while trying to be strong for them. Or you're recovering from trauma while maintaining daily responsibilities, going to therapy, doing the hard work of healing, feeling things you've suppressed for decades, and you still have to show up at work, pay bills, maintain relationships, function in the world. The healing is essential, but it's exhausting, and there's no pause button on the rest of your life. Or you're facing financial strain that won't resolve quickly. The debt is real. The income isn't enough. The stress is constant, and every decision feels heavy with consequence. You can't just wish this away or think positively until it's fixed. You have to live with it while you slowly, incrementally work your way through it. This is chronic pressure, and it requires different strategies than acute stress. You pace yourself. You recognize that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You cannot maintain crisis-level intensity indefinitely. So you find the sustainable pace. You do what absolutely must be done each day, and you let go of what can wait. You lower your standards temporarily, not because you're giving up, but because you're being strategic about your limited energy. You celebrate small victories. You didn't lose your temper with your parent, even when they asked the same question 15 times. You showed up to therapy, even though you wanted to cancel. You paid one bill, even though others are still waiting. These feel insignificant compared to the enormity of what you're facing. But they're not. They're evidence that you're still moving forward, still choosing, still showing up. Acknowledge them. Let yourself feel the small wins. You extend compassion to yourself when you stumble. Because you will stumble. You'll have days when you can't access your tools, when you react poorly, when you feel like you're going backward instead of forward. On those days, you talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend who's struggling. With kindness, with understanding, with the recognition that being human means being imperfect, especially under sustained pressure. You say to yourself, "This is hard. I'm doing the best I can with what I have right now. I stumbled today, and that doesn't erase all the days I didn't stumble. I'm learning, I'm growing, and growth is not linear." Let's address failure and disappointment directly. The moments when, despite your best efforts, things don't work out. You prepared for the job interview. You used your emotional rehearsal. You practiced staying grounded. But you didn't get the job. And now you're sitting with rejection, with disappointment, with the fear that maybe you're not as capable as you thought, or you committed to staying calm during a difficult conversation with your partner, You had all your tools ready, but they said something that hit your wound perfectly, and you reacted badly. You said things you regret. You watched the hurt in their eyes. And now you're facing the reality that knowing better doesn't always mean doing better. This is when self-compassion becomes essential. Not self-pity, not self-indulgence, but self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer someone you love who's struggling. You acknowledge the pain without exaggerating it. I'm disappointed. This hurts. I wanted this to go differently. You don't minimize or bypass. You feel it. You recognize your common humanity. I'm not the only person who's ever failed an interview or reacted poorly under stress. This is part of being human. I'm not uniquely broken because I'm struggling. You put your experience in context. You extend kindness to yourself. I did the best I could with the tools and capacity I had in that moment. I can learn from this without beating myself up about it. I can do better next time. And that's enough. You choose growth over punishment. Setbacks are not evidence that you're failing. They're part of the process. They're information about where you need more practice, more support, more compassion. They're opportunities to prove to yourself that you can fall and get back up, that you can make mistakes, and still be worthy of your own kindness. Now let's look at high-stakes performance scenarios. Job interviews, difficult conversations, presentations, confrontations, moments when emotional control directly impacts outcomes. Your heart is racing, your palms are sweating. You're about to walk into a room where you need to be articulate, confident, present, and your nervous system is screaming that this is dangerous, that you're about to be judged, that failure is catastrophic. This is when you channel nervous energy into focused presence. You don't try to eliminate the nervousness. You recognize it as activation, as energy, as your body preparing you for something important. You reframe it. I'm not anxious. I'm energized. My body is giving me the resources I need to show up fully. You use pre-performance rituals to ground yourself. Before you walk in, you stand in a bathroom stall and press your feet firmly into the ground for 30 seconds. You take 3 conscious breaths. You shake out your hands. You say one sentence to yourself. I'm prepared. I'm capable. I'm here. These aren't affirmations you have to believe. They're anchors that signal to your nervous system that you're choosing to engage rather than flee. During the moment when emotions surge, you recover quickly. Your voice shakes for a sentence. You don't collapse into embarrassment or spiral into, I'm blowing this. You notice it. You take a breath. You continue. You treat the emotional surge like a wave that passes through you instead of a verdict on your competence. You understand that emotional agility under pressure means feeling deeply while acting wisely. You feel the fear. You acknowledge it internally. And you speak anyway. You feel the vulnerability of being seen. You let it make you present rather than defensive. You feel the complexity of what you're navigating, and you hold it without needing to resolve it into something simpler. This is grace in the fire, not the absence of fear or discomfort or challenge, but the presence of wisdom alongside the feeling, the capacity to acknowledge what's true emotionally while choosing what's wise behaviorally. You will stumble. You will have moments when you forget everything you've learned, when you react from old patterns, when pressure overwhelms your capacity. This doesn't mean you've failed. This means you're human, doing something difficult in the middle of real life with real stakes. What matters is that you don't stay down. When you stumble, You notice. You name what happened. You extend compassion. You learn. And you stand back up. Stronger for having fallen. Wiser for having struggled. Pressure is not the enemy of mastery. It's the forge where mastery is proven and refined. It's the heat that transforms knowledge into embodied skill, understanding into lived wisdom, technique into character. You are being forged right now, in every difficult moment, in every test, in every challenge that pushes you beyond what feels comfortable. You are becoming someone who can hold more, feel more, navigate more, while losing yourself less. This is what mastery looks like. Not perfection. Grace. You've proven to yourself that you can hold grace in the fire, that you can navigate pressure without losing yourself, that you can stumble and rise again with compassion instead of shame. Now let's talk about who you've become through this entire journey, because something fundamental has shifted, not just in what you do, but in who you are. You wake up, and the weight isn't there. Not every morning. You're still human. You still have hard days. But this morning, you open your eyes, and there's clarity instead of dread, curiosity instead of fear. You feel the day ahead of you, not as a threat to survive, but as a space to inhabit, to engage with, to move through with intention. You notice your breath. Steady. Present. You notice the light coming through your window. You notice your body, the places that feel rested and the places that hold residual tension from yesterday. And you meet all of it with presence instead of judgment. This is what transformation looks like. Not the absence of difficulty, but a different quality of being with whatever arises. You move through your day, and something is different in how you occupy space. There's a groundedness in your body, a settledness in your nervous system. You're here, fully here, not half present, while the other half is anxious about the future or rehearsing the past. You feel your emotions arise, all of them. The frustration when traffic makes you late, the nervousness before the meeting, the joy when your child laughs, the sadness when you remember something you lost. But you're not swept away by any of them. They move through you like weather patterns. They arrive, they inform you, they shift and change, and eventually pass. And you remain, the sky behind the weather, the witness and the experiencer, but not consumed by the experience. You notice triggers that used to hijack you completely. Someone's tone, a particular kind of criticism, a situation that mirrors an old wound. You feel the activation, the old pattern trying to run its program. But now there's space around it. A pause, a recognition. Oh, this is familiar. This is where I used to react, automatically. But I have choices now. And you choose differently. Not perfectly, not every time. But more often than not, you pause. You name what you're feeling. You respond from wisdom instead of wound. Your relationships have transformed because you have transformed. You can speak your truth without aggression. You know the difference between honesty and attack. You can say, "That hurt me," without making it, "You're terrible." You can express your needs without demanding that others meet them. You can be vulnerable without collapsing into neediness. You can hear criticism without collapse. When someone points out something you could do better, you don't spiral into shame. You don't defend automatically. You listen. You assess whether the feedback is valid. You take what's useful and release what isn't. You thank them for caring enough to be honest, and you remain intact. You can offer love without losing yourself. You give generously, but not at the expense of your own well-being. You care deeply, but you're not responsible for fixing everyone's pain. You show up for people, but you maintain boundaries that protect your energy and your peace. Love no longer requires self-abandonment. You can hold boundaries without guilt. When you say no, you mean it. You don't over-explain or apologize for having limits. You don't carry other people's disappointment as evidence that you're selfish. You understand that boundaries aren't walls. They're the framework that makes real intimacy possible, and you enforce them with clarity and compassion. At work, you contribute with confidence, not because you never doubt yourself, but because you trust your ability to handle whatever emotions arise. You share your ideas in meetings because you know that even if they're rejected, you won't be destroyed. You take on challenging projects because you've proven to yourself that you can navigate difficulty. You take risks, real risks, the kind that matter. You apply for the position you're not quite qualified for. You pitch the idea that scares you. You have the conversation you've been avoiding, not because you're fearless, but because you've learned that fear and action can coexist. That feeling afraid doesn't mean you can't move forward. Your inner experience has fundamentally shifted. There's a deep, quiet trust in yourself now, not the loud, performative confidence you use to try to manufacture, but a settled knowing, a sense that whatever comes, you can handle it. Not because nothing bad will happen, but because you've built the capacity to navigate whatever does. You feel like you've come home to your own body. For so long, you were at war with yourself, fighting your emotions, judging your reactions, trying to be someone other than who you are. But now there's peace. Not the peace of having no problems, but the peace of acceptance. You are who you are. You feel what you feel. And that's not only okay, it's exactly right. You feel whole rather than fragmented. All the parts of yourself that you use to keep separated, the anger you suppressed, the sadness you hid, the joy you didn't trust, the fear you denied, all of it has been integrated. You're not performing different versions of yourself for different audiences. You're just you. Complex. Contradictory sometimes, fully human and whole. You still feel everything. This transformation hasn't made you less emotional. If anything, you feel more deeply, more fully, more across the entire spectrum of human experience. You feel anger. But now it's information about boundaries violated, about injustice that needs addressing, about energy that needs channeling into action. It's not destruction, it's clarity. You feel fear. But now it's your body preparing you for something important, your intuition pointing toward risk that matters, your system alerting you to pay attention. It's not paralysis, it's wisdom. You feel sadness, but now it's grief moving through you, integration happening, loss being honored. It's not depression, it's processing. You feel joy, and now you can fully receive it without waiting for the other shoe to drop, without protecting yourself from inevitable loss, without diminishing it because you don't feel worthy. It's not conditional anymore. It's yours. These emotions move through you like weather patterns. They arrive, they inform, they enrich, and they pass. You're not trying to hold on to the pleasant ones or push away the difficult ones. You're meeting all of them with presence, with curiosity, with the understanding that each one serves a purpose. Let's celebrate the specific victories. The moments that might have seemed small but were actually monumental. The moment you paused instead of lashing out. Your partner said something critical, and you felt the rage flash hot and immediate. But instead of saying the thing that would cut deepest, instead of striking back to make them hurt like they hurt you, You paused. You took 3 seconds. You felt your feet on the ground. You named what was happening. I'm angry. I'm hurt. This touched something old. And you chose to speak from that truth instead of from the weapon. That moment changed everything. That moment proved that you're not a prisoner to your impulses anymore. The time you named your fear and acted anyway. You were terrified to have that conversation, to take that risk, to put yourself out there. Your body was screaming at you to run, to hide, to stay safe. But you named it. I'm afraid. I'm really afraid. And I'm doing this anyway. And you did. And you survived it. And you discovered that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and choosing to move forward because something matters more than your comfort. The day you recognized an old pattern and chose something new. You were about to default to people-pleasing, to saying yes when you meant no, to abandoning yourself to keep someone else comfortable. But you saw it happening. You recognized the pattern. You remembered that you have choices now. And you chose differently. You said no with kindness. You held your boundary with clarity. You prioritized your well-being without guilt. And the world didn't end. The relationship didn't collapse. You just modeled something healthier, and it was okay. These small moments accumulated into profound transformation. Each pause, each naming, each choice, each time you extended compassion to yourself instead of criticism, each time you met emotion with wisdom instead of reactivity, each time you showed up differently. You were building new neural pathways, expanding your window of tolerance, strengthening your prefrontal cortex, healing old attachment wounds, regulating your nervous system, integrating fragmented parts of yourself. You were becoming someone new, not by force, not by willpower, but through practice, through patience, through the courage to keep showing up even when progress felt invisible. And now, here you are. No longer someone trying to control their emotions. You are someone who understands and works with their emotional nature. Someone who has built mastery through practice and patience. Someone who has proven to themselves that change is real and lasting. This is your new identity. Not aspirational, not future. Now, you are this person now. More challenges will come. Life doesn't stop delivering difficulty just because you've done this work. More emotions will surge. More tests will arrive. More pressure will find you. And you will meet each one with the tools you've built, the wisdom you've earned, and the self-trust you've cultivated. You will feel deeply. You will navigate skillfully. You will stumble sometimes. And when you do, you will rise with compassion rather than shame, understanding that falling is part of moving forward, that perfection was never the goal. You will continue to grow. Because mastery isn't a destination you arrive at once and then you're done. It's a practice, a way of being, a continuous unfolding of deeper understanding and greater capacity. But you've crossed a threshold that can never be uncrossed. You know now what you're capable of. You've proven to yourself that transformation is possible, that you can feel everything without being controlled by anything, that you can be both vulnerable and strong, both feeling and wise, both fully human and remarkably free. Your emotions don't control everything anymore. You do. Not through force or suppression, not by trying to eliminate feelings or transcend your humanity, but through understanding, through practice, through the courage to feel deeply while living wisely. You have transformed not just how you respond to emotions, but who you are at your core. The person standing in the grocery store aisle, paralyzed by anxiety. That version of you still exists in your history. But it's not who you are now. Now you're someone who breathes through discomfort, who names what they feel, who chooses how they respond, who trusts themselves to handle whatever arises, who extends compassion to their own struggle, who celebrates their growth, who keeps showing up. You are calm in chaos, clear in confusion, connected to a power inside you that most people never learn to access. This new version of you, calm, clear, connected, courageous. This is who you were always meant to become. This is who you are. And everything that comes next, every challenge and triumph, every emotion and experience, every moment of your life from this point forward, you will meet it as this person. This integrated, whole, emotionally masterful version of yourself. Not perfect, not finished, but profoundly transformed. And that transformation changes everything. Everything.